So buddies, I almost got discouraged from editing this video again because the previous edit that was almost done mistakenly got deleted, and it was so painful and discouraging, but I just had to dust myself up and re-edit this video. Well, nothing to worry about. Thank God I found the encouragement to start all over with this editing again. And oops, before I forget, my name is Whitney IY. And if you're new on this beautiful space, you're highly, highly welcome. And if you're an already subscriber, thank you so much for sticking with me. As shown in this clip, we'll be learning how to make this beautiful layered dress that has ruffles at the bustier area. So if this is something you're interested in, dwell and keep watching. I made use of this patterned crepe material, which can also be called flowered crepe, and I also made use of a zip, an stay, and a breast part or a thick wadding, which is not here, but you get to see them during the process of making this dress. And for this fabric, I made use of 3.5 yards. I used 2.5 yards for the patterned crepe and 1 yard for the black plain crepe, and this black plain crepe will serve as the lining. Above are the measurements used, and I'll be drafting on a pattern paper. But if you can't get a pattern paper, make use of a newspaper or just get to sellotape papers together to form a larger paper. So let's begin drafting. The first step in drafting this out is to draft the upper basic bodies, and with that I'll be drafting out the front pattern first. And to do this, I'll first of all divide my shoulder measurement by 2 and mark it out here. Then I'll mark out 3 inches for the neck width here. Next, from the shoulder measurement, I'll mark out my armhole depth. And to get my armhole depth, I'll divide my round bust measurement by 6 plus 1.5. So my round bust measurement is 38 divided by 6 plus 1.5 gives me 7.8 inches. And that is what I just marked out here. And here I'm just making sure that these aligns with the shoulder measurement so that I'll get a straight line when connecting the armhole depth to the shoulder measurement like this. After doing this, from the shoulder measurement here, I'll come down by 1 inch like so. And after coming down by 1 inch, I'll connect this 1 inch to the neck width like this using my rule. And this gives me that shoulder slant or slope. You know our shoulders are not straight, so the reason for this. Moving on, I will go ahead and mark out the chest line. And to get the chest line, I'll divide my round bust measurement by 4 and mark it out. My round bust measurement is 38 inches. Divided by 4 gives me 9.5. And that is what I just marked out here. And I'll bring in my rule and connect this straight down like so. And this line is referred to as the chest line. Next step is to go ahead and get the armhole curve, draw it out. So for the armhole curve, I'll get the midpoint between the shoulder slope and the chest line by placing my tape like this and folding it over into two to get the center of this. And after doing this, I'll mark out the midpoint on this straight line here. And from the midpoint, I will come in by 0.75 inch. Moving on, I'll go ahead and connect the shoulder slant to the 0.75 inch and to the bust measurement to get the armhole curve like so. Next step is to go ahead and mark out my bust point, which is from the shoulder to the nipple measurement. And for me, it is 10.5. That is what I just marked out here. And I'll bring in my rule and connect the dots to get a straight line like so. And this line is the bust point line. Next step is to go ahead and mark out my under bust line. That is from shoulder to underneath the bust. And for me, it is 14.5 inches. And that is what I am marking out here. And I'll also bring in my rule to connect the dots together to get a straight line like so. And this line is referred to as the under bust line. Once this is done, the next step is to go ahead and mark out my front waist length. Take note that the front waist length is different from the back waist length. So for the front waist length, I am working with 17 inches, and that is what I'm marking out here. And after marking this out, I'll also bring in my rule to connect the dots together to get a straight line like so. And this line is referred to as the front waist line. Now from the front waist line, I'll come down by 8 inches like so. And this will give me the hip line. So after marking this out, I'll also bring in my rule to connect the dots together to get a straight line like so. And this line is the hip line. Moving forward, it's now time to mark out the dart line. And to get your dart line, you divide your nipple to nipple measurement by 2. And me, after dividing, I got 4. And that is what I marked out on my bust point, my under bust line, my waistline, and the hip line. And I connected these 4 points together to get a straight line, like so. After doing this, on the waistline, I'll go out on both sides of the dart line by half an inch, and from the bust point, I'll come down by 1 inch, and from the hip line, I'll go up by 2 inches, and I'll connect these points together to give me the basic dart. And after doing this, it's now time to mark out the rest round bodice measurement. So on the waistline, I'll divide my round waist measurement by 4 and add this 1 inch for the dart intake. And the round waist measurement I'm working with is 33 inches. Divided by 4 gives me 8.25. Plus this 1 inch for the dart intake gives me 9.25. And that is what I marked out here. And I'll bring in my rule to connect this to the chest line or the bust measurement like this. And on the hip line, I'll also divide the round hip measurement by 4 and mark it out. And after dividing by 4, I have 10 and I've marked that out, and I'll connect it to the waistline as so. Now it's time to mark out the bust dart. And to get the bust dart, you need to subtract your front waist length from your back waist length. So my front waist length is 17 inches and the back waist length is 15 inches. 17 minus 15 gives me 2, and that is what I've marked out here on the side from the bust point line. And I'll bring in my rule and connect this 2 inches to the dart line on the bust point line. And here the bust dart is ready. At this point, I have successfully drafted out the front basic bodies, and now it's time to alter this pattern to get the front upper bodies of this dress. And to do this, I'll first of all have to mark out my shoulder dart line. And to get the shoulder dart line, I'll just get the midpoint of my shoulder by placing my tape like this on the shoulder and folding it over into two, or whatever I get, I'll divide it by 2 and mark it out. And now I'll go ahead and connect this midpoint to the bust point like so. And this gives me the shoulder dart line. Right now, it's time for me to decide where I want this dress to start from on the chest, and this is also called the over bust line. So from the chest line, I'll go up by 1.5 inch like so. You can come up by 1 inch. It depends on how high you want the dress to be on your chest, where you want it to start from. And I'll connect this dot across the shoulder dart like so. And on both sides of the shoulder dart, I'll come out by 1 inch on both sides. This is to make it tighter around the chest. And I'll go ahead and connect the over bust tightening to the bust point like so. After doing this, it's now time to tighten the underbust. And to do this, I'll come out from the dart leg on both sides of the underbust line by half an inch. And I'll connect this half an inch on both sides to the waistline like so. And now it's time to connect the underbust tightening to the overbust tightening line with a curve. So I'll be using the curve part of the roll, and I'll be doing the center front side first like this. Now after connecting that of the center front side, to connect that of the side, I'll need to close up the bust dart, and to close up the bust dart, I need to cut open the dart line. So to do this, I'll need to first of all cut out my front pattern like this. After cutting out the front pattern, I can go ahead and cut open the dart line and stop at the bust point here like so. And after doing this, I can proceed to now close up the bust dart by placing this dart leg on the bust dart on the bust point line like so. And I'll bring in my paper tape to seal this down. Once this is done, the next step is to make sure that the side is equal, and I'll bring in my rule to do this. Now here's a little secret. If you want the bustier not to be too tight on you, just connect from the armhole to the waistline. But if you want the bustier tight, like you don't mind, just connect from the armhole to the bust points like this. Now I can go ahead and connect the under bust tightening on the side to the over bust tightening line like this with a curve, using the curve part of the row. Moving on, it's time to create the style line I want on the over bust, and to do that, I will close up this over bust tightening temporarily like this, and I'll bring in my curve rule to create the style line I want on this over bust. And for this dress, I don't want an obvious sweetheart neckline. I just want a little bit of curve. So I'll go ahead and draw this curve to the overbust tightening like this. And to connect this to the side to give me the armhole, I'll need to go up from the side here by 1 inch. The reason for this is to avoid the mamas from popping out at the side. So I'll go ahead and connect this back to the side like this. And to draw the armhole, I'll just flip my curve over like this, and draw a downward curve to the over bust tightening line. And this is what I have. So right now the over bust style line is ready, so it's now time to the side that of the hem. Now for that of the hem, you can decide how deep you want it to go at the center front, or how low you want it to be on the side from the waist, or the type of style line you want. It can be a basque waistline, or a curved waistline, or even a straight waistline. Whatever you want, go ahead and achieve it. And for this dress, I want a curved waistline. So from the center front here, from the waistline, I came down by 2 inches initially, but I later changed it to 2.5 inches. And from the side, I decided not to come down at all. I just connected from the waistline to the 2.5 inches I came down with on the center front, because this will fit me better when the flare starts from my waistline. So I'll bring in my curve rule. If you want a basque waistline, use this straight part of your rule to just, connect deeper into your center front, and that gives you a basque waistline. I'm using this a curved waistline I want. I just use the curved part of my rule to achieve a little bit of curve. So this is where I readjusted it to 2.5 inches, and I reconnected it back to the waistline like this. So after doing this, it's now time to cut out this pattern. But I'll go ahead and label the lines on the side respectively like so. And I'll bring in my scissors and cut out the pattern. Cut out the hem, the oval bust like so. Cut out the dots, and I'll also cut out the side like so. And after doing this, I'll move on to the next step. And for the next step, the ruffle stops on the underbust. So for that reason, I'll be cutting out the underbust lines on both sides like this. And after cutting this out, I will go ahead and make this a down piece 1 O part, or 1 O piece, by closing up the dots like this and bringing my paper tape to seal it down like so. And I'll also attach a paper underneath like so that I can even out the M. And I'll go ahead and label this part as B, and this bustier side as A. And for the allowances, when I'm cutting out on fabric, the center front here will be on fold, and the side there will have 1 inch sewing allowance, and this underbust will have ½ inch, and the hem will also have ½ inch for attaching the flare. And I'll set the B aside and focus on the A for now. For this A part, there are several ways to make it. You can decide not to pad it up and just use the slash and spread method to slash the pattern papers for the A, after using paper tape to close up the dots, and then cut out your fabric, and that is it with no padding. But for this dress, I want the bra effect on this A part, so the more reason I am going an extra mile to pad it up with bust padding or thick wadding. Now I'll go ahead and cut this out on the black crepe material, which serves as my lining. And when cutting this out on the lining, I'll be leaving ½ inch allowance on the dart here, ½ inch allowance at the over bust here, and also the center front here will be on fold, and the underbust I'll be leaving ½ inch allowance on the other bust, and the side seam will be 1 inch. Moving on, it's time to draft out the back pattern, and here's my pattern paper. So I'll go ahead and divide my shoulder measurement by 2 and mark it out, and also mark out 3 inches for the neck width. And from the shoulder measurement, I'll come down and mark out my armhole depth, and I'm just double checking to make sure it aligns when connecting the armhole depth to the shoulder. Same thing I did for the front pattern. And from the shoulder, I'll come down by 1 inch like so, and I'll connect the 1 inch to the neck width to get the shoulder slant or slope. Next, I'll go ahead and get the chest line by dividing my round bust measurement by 4 and marking it out, and for me it is 9.5, and I'll connect this straight down like so. And this line is the chest line. Moving on, it's time to draw the armhole curve, and I will go ahead and get the midpoint from the shoulder slant to the chest line and mark out the midpoint. And from the midpoint, I'll come in by ½ inch, and I'll bring in my curve rule and connect the shoulder slant to the ½ inch and to the bust measurement like so. Next, I'll mark out the back waist length, and here I'm making use of 15 inches. So from your shoulder to the deepest part of your back, and that is how you get your back waist length. So after marking this out, I'll bring in my rule and connect the dots together to get a straight line like so, and this line is referred to as the back waist line. Now to remove zip budging from the center back after sewing in the zip, I'll go ahead and do the back tightening by going in from the center back on the waistline by 0.75 inch, and I'll connect the 0.75 inch on the waistline to the neckline like this with a slanted line like so. Next, from the waistline, I'll come down by 8 inches to get the hip line, and after marking this out, I'll bring in my rule to connect the dots together to get a straight line like so, and this line is referred to as the hip line. Now I'll also go ahead and connect this back tightening to the hip line using the slanted line like so. Now to secure this back tightening more, I will do the 100% back tightening, and to do this I'll just go out on both sides of the center back on the waistline by half an inch like so, and I'll connect this half an inch back to the waistline like this. So even with the deepest back, there will be no back budging. So moving on, I'll go ahead and close up this that on the waistline here so that I can go ahead and mark out the dart line. And I'll close it up like this and bring in my paper tape to hold it down. Next is to mark out the dart line, and to do that I'll be adding the center back tightening to the bust span. So the center back is 0.75 and the bust span I'm working with is 4 inches, and that will give me 4.75. So on the waistline I'll mark out 4.75 here, and on the hip line I'll also mark out 4.75 inches, and on the chest line I'll mark out 4.75 inches, and I'll connect this point together to give me a slightly bent line like so. Moving on the waistline, on both sides of the dart line, I'll come out by half an inch like so. And on the hip line, I'll come up by 2 inches like so. And I'll connect this to the half an inch and also connect the half an inch on both sides to the chest line, to the dart on the chest line as well, like this. Once this is done, I can go ahead and divide the round waist measurement by 4 and add the 1 inch darted take. So it is 9.25, and you can see the way I place my tape from the new center back to mark this out on the waistline. And I will connect it to the bust measurement like so. On the hip line, I'll divide the round hip measurement by 4 and mark it out as well, and I will connect it to the waistline like this. At this point, the back basic bodice is ready, and it's now time for me to alter this pattern to what I desire for the back bodies of this dress. I don't know if this makes sense. So on the center back from the waistline, I came down by 1.5 inch and I connected this straight to the waistline on the side with a slight curve. I don't want the center back to be so deep down. That's why I came down by 1.5 inch instead of 2.5 inches I did for the front. And on the armhole, I went up by 1 inch, same thing I did for the front armhole. And at this point, you can decide the type of neckline you want for your back neckline. If it's a deep V back neckline or straight neckline, whatever you want. So for me, I really do not mind. So I just connected the 1 inch straight to the chest line using a slight curve. And now it's time to tighten the chest line. And to do this, on both sides of the dart line, I'll go out by half an inch on the chest line and I'll connect it to the waistline like this. And I'll go ahead and cut out the hem, cut out the side, and cut out the center back. And now I'll go ahead and close up the darts because I don't want to sew any darts on this back pattern. So I'll use my paper tape to close it up like so, and I will even out the neckline. And please take note, before cutting out the front pattern, measure from the shoulder to over bust, and for the back pattern, measure from the shoulder to the chest line because you will need this measurement for cutting out your straps. And moving on, I'll go ahead and cut out the neckline. And I'll label the center back and also the side back. And for the allowances when cutting this out on fabric, I'll be leaving half an inch at the chest line here, and I'll be leaving 1 inch here at the center back, 1 inch at the side seam, and half an inch at the end. Moving on, I've gone ahead to cut out the A part on the black crepe. I cut out both the main fabric and the lining. Let's just call it the main fabric and the lining for now, with the necessary allowance. And I folded the fabric into two to cut this out with the center front unfold. And for the B parts, I'll go ahead and bring in the pattern fabric and cut it out on the pattern fabric and also cut out a lining for it. And take note that my fabrics are always folded into two to cut this out with the center front unfold. And for the back pattern, I'll also cut it out on the pattern crepe and also cut out a lining for it, leaving the necessary allowances I wrote down. Now this is it for the B part. I've cut out the pattern crepe and also the lining for it as well. And up here you can see I left half an inch at the under bust, 1 inch for the side seam, and half an inch at the hem. And the center front is on fold. So right now I'll bring in the stay and go ahead and iron stay to the main fabric's edge. And I'll also iron stay to the main fabric of the back pattern. So after ironing stay, the next thing I'll also go ahead and do is to bring in breast part and cut it out for the A part for the bustier. So I would first of all just go ahead and label the wrong side of this fabric so that it's easier to know. To cut out the breast part, I'll bring in the pattern papers for the A. And for the breast part, I'll be using this medium-sized thick breast part. And for the pattern, a little alteration has to be done on it to cut out the breast part. So you can either go up by 1 inch from your chest line or just start from the chest line like this. So for me, I'll just start from the chest line. So I'll just fold in from the chest line like so. And from the side here, I'll come in by half an inch so that the breast part does not enter the side seam. And I'll go ahead and blend it up like so and blend it to half an inch down. And I will cut this out like this. And now I can use this to cut out the breast part. On the dart here, I'll be leaving half an inch. You can also leave half an inch on the under bust, but for me, I just decide to just only leave half an inch on the dart. So right now, I'll go ahead and fold my pattern into two, and as you can see, this center front here is on fold, and I've placed my pattern on it, and I've marked out the half an inch allowance on the dart, and I've cut it out, and I also got to notch the bust point. For the side, I've also gone ahead to fold the breast part into two and use my pin to hold it in place, and I left half an inch on the dart. Like I stated earlier on, you can also leave half an inch on the under bust, and I'll go ahead and cut it. For me, I just I don't know, I was not just in the mood to do that, and I just went ahead to cut this, and this is it. After doing this, I'll go ahead and bring in the main fabric and the lining that I cut out from the black crepe material earlier on, and here it is. And I'll go ahead and arrange the fabrics like so. And after ironing ST, after I get to iron ST, I will go ahead and also iron the bust pad. In ironing the bust pad, you iron the part that has this shiny look on the fabric or on the ST. So this is it. I've ironed in the ST and I've also ironed in the bust pad, as you can see. So right now it's time to close up the dart, stitch up the dart. And to do this, I'll go ahead and close up each sides of the darts like this, making sure the right sides are facing each other. And I'll carefully pin it down like so. And I'll go ahead and close up the darts using half an inch, and I will also repeat the same thing on this other side as well. Close it up like so, making sure that the right sides are facing each other because the stitches will be done on the wrong side. After closing up the darts on the main fabric, I will also bring in the lining as well and repeat the same thing. Go ahead and close up that, making sure that the right sides are facing each other. And this is what I have after closing up the darts on the main fabric, and this is the wrong side. And I went ahead to top stitch the seams to the sides as well. Moving on, I'll go ahead and bring in my tape rule and measure the width of this bustier from side to side. And here I have 20 inches. Considering I'm placing my tape at the fullest part of the bustier, and I have 20 inches. And for the length here, I have 9.5 inches. And this measurement will be used to cut out the patterned crepe. Now, since the width is 20 inches and you know there are ruffles on this bustier, I will multiply this 20 inches by 2 to give me 40 inches, and that is what I'll cut out for this patterned fabric. So as you can see, for the length it is 9.5 inches, exactly what I have, and for the width here it is 40 inches. Next, I'll go ahead and get the midpoint of the patterned crepe by folding it over into two equal parts like so and notching both ends. And I will also bring in the bustier and fold it into two equal parts and also notch the midpoints, which is the center. I'll notch it on both ends as well. And next, I'll bring in the patterned crepe and place it on the bustier, making sure that the wrong side of the patterned crepe is facing the right side of the bustier, while making sure that the midpoints are directly on top of each other. And I'll use my pins to hold it in place like this. After doing this, I'll go ahead and create the ruffles like so, folding over the fabric like this with my fingers and running a straight stitch on them using 0.25-inch allowance. And I will do this at the over bust, and after doing that of the over bust, I'll come back and show you. And this is what we have. I have stitched the fabric on the over bust. Moving on, the side of the bustier is quite shorter than the middle of the bustier, so for that reason I'm going to go ahead and cut out the difference between the side and the middle. So the side was 6.5 inches and the middle was 9.5 inches. That gives about 3 inches. So I just removed 1.5 inches from the side of the patterned crepe at the hem here. And I slanted it over like this, and I brought in my scissors to cut it out, cut this out. This is to ensure that the patterned crepe does not feel so full at the side after, creating the ruffles on the underbust. I hope you don't understand. And this is what I have. I am done sewing the patterned crepe on the overbust and underbust of the bustier. And make sure you sew the ruffles to one direction on the overbust and on the underbust so that they align and move towards one direction. And in ironing the bustier, I'll be using my bust arm to iron the bustier. This gives it a more curvier look. It does not make the bustier flat. It gives it that curved look. So after doing this, it's now time to sew in the B part. So I'll go ahead and bring in the B part, and this is it. So for the B part, I've also ironed an stay to the patterned crepe, which is the main fabric, and I'll take out the lining, and now it's time to sew this in. So to do this, I'll get the midpoint of the B part by folding it over into two and giving the midpoint a notch, and I'll place the midpoint on the midpoint of the bustier on the other bust, and I'll pin it down. I'll close it up with 1/2 inch, and I made sure that the right sides of the fabrics are facing each other. So I'll bring in the lining as well, and I'll repeat the same thing on the lining. Place the B lining on the bustier, making sure that the right side are facing each other. At this point, I had to end the video and put the video into two sections because I was quite exhausted and I needed to take a little break, and also for easier understanding so that this does not seem bulky to anyone. And in the second part of this video, I will close up the sides of the upper bodies, cut and sew in the flare, and finish up the dress. And if you've enjoyed this video so far and you find it helpful, please do well to hit on that subscribe button, and don't forget to hit on the notification bell so that you'll be notified whenever I drop a new video. And don't forget to give this video a thumbs up, and see you on the next section of this video.